Not a week later, Al Jazeera offered a recorded broadcast by bin Laden, which gave a few hints that he and Saddam were now ready conceivably to enter into direct contact, even though he called the, quote, socialists, unquote, in Baghdad, quote, infidels, unquote. But this last statement was an immediate contradiction to what he had just finished saying a moment earlier. Quote, it does no hurt under these conditions of attack by the West that the interests of Muslims will ultimately contradict the interests of the socialists in the fight against the Crusaders. Close quote. Bin Laden may have chosen to be ambiguous and two-sided in his remarks, but the suggestion of a common interest, despite all, between al-Qaeda and Saddam was also there. Was it finally happening? Had the enemy of Saddam's enemy now become Saddam's friend? If so, that could prove a disaster. We might vanquish Iraq and still suffer from the catastrophe we claim to be going to war to avert. Iraq's weapons of mass destruction could yet belong to bin Laden. Without those weapons, al-Qaeda would have to scrape and scratch. But if Saddam were to make transfer of even a sizable fraction of his biowarfare and chemical stores, bin Laden would be considerably more dangerous. The inner diktat of George W. Bush to go to war with Iraq as rapidly as possible now had to face the possibility that Saddam had come up with an exceptional countermove. Was he saying, in effect, allow me to string along the inspections and you are still relatively safe? You may be certain I will not rush to give my very best stuff to Osama bin Laden, so long as we can keep playing this inspection game back and forth, back and forth. Go to war with me, however, and Osama will smile. I may go down in flames, but he and his people will be happy. Be certain he wants you to go to war with me. Since the sequence of these kinds of moves was present from the beginning, it could be asked, as indeed more than a few Americans were now asking, how did we allow such choices in the first place? These hellish Hobson's choices. Meanwhile, the world was reacting in horror to the Bush agenda for war. The European edition of Time magazine had been conducting a poll on its website. Which country poses a greater danger to world peace in the year 2003? With 318,000 votes cast, the responses were North Korea 7%, Iraq 8%, the United States 84%. As John le Carré had put it to the Times of London, quote, America has entered one of its periods of historic madness, but this is the worst I can remember. Close quote. Harold Pinter no longer chose to be subtle in language. The American administration, he said, is now a bloodthirsty wild animal. Bombs are its only vocabulary. Many Americans we know are horrified by the posture of their government, but seem to be helpless. Unless Europe finds the solidarity, intelligence, courage, and will to challenge and resist American power, Europe itself will deserve Alexander Herzen's declaration, we are not the doctors, we are the disease. According to Reuters on February 15th, more than 4 million people from Bangkok to Brussels, from Canberra to Calcutta, took to the streets to pillory Bush as a bloodthirsty warmonger. A quick review of the 2 years since George W. Bush took office may offer some light on why we are where we are. He came into office with the possibility of a recession, plus all the unhappy odor of his investiture through an election that could best be described as legitimate/illegitimate. America had learned all over again that Republicans had fine skills for dirty legal fighting. They were able to call, after all, on a powerful gene stream. The Republicans who led the campaign to seize Florida in the year 2000 are descended from 125 years of lawyers and bankers with the cold nerve and fired-up greed to foreclose on many a widow's home or farm. Nor did these lawyers and bankers walk about suffused with guilt. They had the moral equivalent of Teflon on their soul. Church on Sunday, foreclose on Monday. Of course their descendants won in Florida.